You can't put the business aside because guess what? When you leave and don't do this job doesn't get done.
Yeah, obviously, if you're self-employed, this is how it works. You don't get paid leave when you're self-employed because there's nobody paying you. All right, so once again, guys, we're going to be doing another watch along here. This is the 21 hard truths about online reselling that you need to know. So as always, we are critiquing the advice and not the advisor. The show is not about cutting anyone down, but to talk about the ideas, okay? I think good ideas should be spread and bad ideas should be debated. And therefore, I'll give you a thumbs up on the ones that I think are good. And, you know, we'll talk about the ones that should be debated, okay? So let's just jump in today's video. Okay, so 21 hard truths about online reselling that you need to know. Let's get into it.
This year marks 25 years that my wife and I have been reselling online. We have learned so much along the way. Reselling is a lot of work, and I want to share with you 21 brutal truths about reselling online. Number one, not everybody is going to appreciate what you do. And my advice to you on this is that even for those people that see you as the scum of the earth, it is okay for you to leave those people behind. You can't educate everybody about what we do because...
But did he just show a photo of a scalper who's like, you know, selling a PlayStation at $1,000? Supply and demand, my friend. But I mean, if some people disagree with it and alienate yourself from toxic people, yes, absolutely, right? If you find them toxic in your life, then stay away from them. Sure, this is just standard advice.
Some of those people don't want to be educated, and it is okay for you to leave them in their ignorance and for you to move on forward.
And some people don't want to be educated that reselling is a diminishing return, but you'll see what I mean in a bit.
Number two, the time investment required to do online selling is huge. And one of the biggest mistakes people make as they go into this and hope to create it as a business and to turn it into a living is that they underestimate how much time it takes to do this properly. So don't go into this blind. And number three, this isn't a job that's going to make you wealthy overnight.
So the three things in the beginning, it's super hard, right? And, you know, there's already a lot of naysayers for a reason, okay? And then that, you know, this thing doesn't make you money overnight, and it's quite the time vacuum. Like he's already saying all the quiet parts out loud that most gurus don't really want you to know, but then they drop it in every now and then.
This job requires a lot of time, but I'm of the belief that building a business slow and steady and intentionally is truly the way to do something that is going to provide for you for the long haul.
Totally agree with what he said on paper, right? The problem is what he's saying it about. He's saying this about reselling, and reselling doesn't build anything for the long haul because you sell off the listing every single time because you only, you know, purchase like these one-off items. You'll see that in his channel, he does a lot of single one-off items, right? What you need to do is build long-term evergreen listings so that you have replenishable goods that can just sell that same listing over and over again. This way, you're not always back to the drawing board, looking for more stuff to sell, doing more photos, cleaning stuff up, etc., etc. So what he's doing here is building up a lot of different listings, but without his own elbow grease constantly in this business, the business stops tomorrow, you know? Sure, you're still going to sell off like a few things the next day of like all the listings that you put up, but it starts to dwindle. It starts to take a nosedive, right? If I stopped doing my business for, I don't know, maybe 3, 4, 6 months or whatever, the only way my business takes a dive is because I didn't replenish those goods. All I have to do is just reorder and then replenish, and then we're still going, constantly going. That is building a business. The problem with reselling is that people think they're building something because they're expanding the listings, but the listings need to be evergreen. And in reselling, more oftentimes than not, once you sell the listing itself, like everything, all the work that you put into it, it's gone with it.
You can build something that is sustainable. And number 4, mistakes are going to happen. All of us make mistakes while we're learning. And as somebody who used to teach elementary school, it required a lot of patience as kids were learning to do things. And my advice to you, because you are going to make mistakes the same that I made mistakes, is to allow yourself the same grace that you would somebody else who's learning a new task. Allowing yourself
don't be too hard on yourself. Yeah, in general, sure. And everybody's going to make mistakes, sure.
A little bit of grace, take some of the pressure off as you learn to grow this thing. And number 5, here's a harsh truth for you. You are the worst that you will ever be at sourcing right here, right now, today. If you go into this job and you learn as you go and you keep building on what you're able to find and able to do because you know more about what to look for and what it is you like to sell and you're able to sell, you're going to get better and better and better at this. And why that's important? Today is not the day to fill up your entire inventory by buying every single thing that you find, because you're going to be better at it tomorrow.
Okay, so obviously this is standard advice, right? You're definitely going to get better through practice and repetition. The problem with this advice is that it's more just motivational fluff than actual real helpful advice. The problem with sourcing is that you cannot just go out and find a good item but under sheer will, right? A lot of these gurus will always tell you, you got to find a good item, find a good item. But the question is, what is exactly is a good item? Well, it's an item that sells, but you don't find that out until after the fact. How do I know before that? The issue is that you have to understand marketplaces. And when you understand marketplaces of what people are really looking for, then you know which item to get in order to fulfill that. So you can't just go out with no knowledge whatsoever and then just start doing stuff. But the difficulty in this, right, is the method of how they're telling you to do stuff. See, it would be the wiser, more logical thing to do to study up on your topics, your niches, your categories, specific items and whatever, and then go out and then specifically look for those things and stay within the things that you studied up on. Not so much to just go out in the world with general surface knowledge of a little bit of everything, right? To just be a jack of all trades and then do your best as you come across stuff, especially, one hitter quitter items that after you sell it, now you got to go get more. That's the whole issue about sourcing, right? Because when you study up on stuff and then you know that, okay, I'm going to be able to move a batch of these things because my market knowledge and, the studies that I put in, now I'm just going to go source from an actual supplier. I'm not going out to thrift stores and sifting through junk.
Number 6, burnout is real in this job.
Yep.
We run out of gas because this job can take up every single moment of your day. Because we love what we do, it will completely fill your schedule.
This is exactly what I mean. But if you watch my other videos, I've warned this many times. This business is a time vacuum. As you get more successful with your business, you should have more time on your hands. That's why I'm able to do these videos. And the more successful I am, the more time I have. It's not the other way around. He's telling you right now it's a time vacuum, and people should, heed the warning.
And the hardest part when you have your own business is taking time off and not feeling guilty about it. That is so crucial to schedule guilt-free time off, because that time allows you to rejuvenate and to come back in with way more energy than if you just stuck with it 24/7. Number 7.
Okay, see, here's the thing, right? The burnout is real, it happens, and everybody tells you this, right? Okay, so what is the solution, right? To take some time off and then get back in there and get burned out again. No, don't do that, okay? You're supposed to build a sustainable business that can run on its own, right? So here's what you do. you research your niche, develop your expertise so that you could start spotting opportunities in markets to say, hey, I see that this item is pretty good and it solves a problem, but I could solve that problem better with my design. I see that this item is kind of hot right now, but people don't really like the color that it comes in. I'm going to offer it in colors that people actually want. So now it's the item that they actually want, and it comes in the color that they really appreciate. So that's going to give people two reasons to buy from me as opposed to somebody else, and we'll just save it. We'll sell it at the same price, because usually factories are not going to charge you more to develop something in a different color. Those are smart moves to do, and then try to build up an evergreen item like that so that you could just keep reordering from a factory and then selling it, so that you didn't sell off all your hard work. So every single time you do a listing, you go through the same thing, right? You source it, you box it, you photograph it, you ship it, you weigh it, all that stuff. But if you're doing one-off items, you're always resetting the business and starting from scratch. And that's where the burnout comes from, that resellers don't want to, either they don't want to admit it to you or they don't realize it themselves. That's where the constant burnout comes from. You sold off the equity instead of retain the equity. And that's why you're not building a business where you're doing reselling. I hope he knows.
7 pictures are worth 1,000 words. You have heard this again and again and again in your life, and it is never more true than when you are reselling online. I don't want to spend the time it takes to write up a lengthy description when I can take really clear, accurate photos and accomplish way more than making a very, very complete description that nobody's going to read. I need my description to be accurate, but I need the story of the item that I'm selling contained in those pictures. It's the first thing you need to upgrade as you start selling online. Is your product photography needs to grow and become very accurate, very easy to duplicate.
Okay, so real quick, I just want to talk about photography, okay? What he's doing here is great for your initial listing. If you ever wanted to build an evergreen listing where you're going to up your game on this, well, the first thing would happen is that you have to prove that this item can sell many copies every single day so that it warrants the fact that you should reorder this item. Because then you're definitely going to be making money to the point where you could make real projected sales. Now, you're going to hear a lot of resellers talk about, we're going to project how much money, and it doesn't make any sense because you're doing a whole bunch of trial and error items. If all of your items are just one and done items, just single copy, those are all in its infancy stages of trial and error. You don't know if that thing's going to sell today, tomorrow, or 8 months later. So once you've established that, let's say this pig, for example, is going to move 5 pigs every single day, okay, it is definitely worth your time now to go from these home taken studio photos over to get some help from real professionals, right? So that they could take even better studio photos and then transfer those photos to another graphic designer to make you infographic photos, lifestyle photos, things that really capture emotion in the photos that you can't just do with, a home studio. Now, your sales is going to be completely different because when people see your photos, it's emotionally driven. When we see his photos, they're just very clean, clear photos that the algorithm is going to say, okay, pass. But a passing grade is not the same as getting your listing bumped all the way up and it's just attractive at a glance. This is exactly the reason why we try our best to do attractive thumbnails for YouTube, right? So, why would you not do the same for your items as well? But the first thing you need to do is that you have to have a proven item so that's worth your time to do this. But when you're doing reselling, you're just doing one and done. So it's not worth the time to invest in really, really good photos. This is as good as it gets with the photos. That's what I'm trying to point out.
You need your photographs to be something that you become very efficient at in making something that's really clear what the buyer can expect. Real
quick, I just also wanted to say that what you got, right, are like some thumbnail photos, some side shots, and reverse shots up and down, close-ups or whatever. Those are the types of photos you have. Once you are a real professional seller in a traditional business model, the types of photos you have are not called that anymore. Outside of your studio shot, you have something called a hero photo, a lifestyle photo, an install photo, right? You have infographic photos, sizing photos. The sizing photo doesn't look like, just a ruler on top of that, okay? There's a lot more infographics than what that looks like real professional things, right? If you ever looked at, a catalog for, I don't know, a professional catalog of computer parts, sports equipment, stuff like that, that's what it would look like. You would have photos like that as opposed to photos like this.
Number 8, emotional attachments happen when you love what you're doing. I will go out and either fall in love with the person that I'm buying it from and their story, or the item itself, I'm able to rescue it from someplace and I fall in love with it. But if I fall in love with it to the point that it doesn't sell because I'm hanging on to it so tight, then I'm hurting my business. So remember that it is so easy to become emotionally attached to things when we're doing this, but you have to let this stuff go in order to grow your business.
I've heard of this actually happening to a lot of people, and it doesn't happen in my business because I have multiple copies of it. If I want to keep one for myself, great. I do, keep a couple of items because I developed my own items, and it's for everyday use. So if I have some really nice looking seat covers, yeah, I use it in my own car. Sure, why not? I kept one for myself. But because I have so many multiple copies of it, even if I fall in love with one, okay, fine, I still have others to sell. But if you're doing these one and done items, yeah, you fall in love with it. Sure, you don't flip it, you're not making money. But you knew that, right? You know what you're doing there. You realize that. So I guess it's kind of, to point that out. I agree with what he's saying. So let's move on.
Number 9, sales slumps are a part of this job. And depending upon what you sell, that will define some of the slumps.
But earlier you just said, right, a long-term sustainable business and stuff. It's a little conflicting when you have the slumps in there, right? You're supposed to be building a strong business where you know how to combat against like having slumps. So if you're doing steady items that are replenishable, you don't have this issue.
We sell a lot of vintage clothes. They don't sell very well at Christmas, but that is not a downtime for us. I look at those downturns that are completely natural. That is a time for Melody and I to refocus and refuel and then reload. We're able to clean up our inventory. We're able to get new stuff listed and be ready when that ball starts rolling again. So downturns are natural, but turn those into an advantage. And number...
Whoa. He glossed over a lot of things here. Okay. We're going to rewind on this one. I'm really sorry to rewind on this one. Okay. So two things. Number one, keep in mind, right? Most businesses have the best Q4, right? Because it's Christmas, right? So most businesses do very well during Christmas because people are out and about, they're spending money and they're buying gifts and stuff. And that is a real hard truth, right? Because when people are gift shopping, people don't normally want to give used goods, vintage goods. I'm not saying nobody does it, but generally people don't want to gift other people old stuff, right? So his business is going to take a slump for December while most businesses are always doing the holiday rush. But the problem is that he says this specifically, okay?
Melody and I to refocus and refuel and then reload. We're able to clean up our inventory. We're able to get new stuff listed and be ready when that ball starts rolling again.
Right. But how? He never got into it. See, here's the thing. If you have inventory and now your sales takes a slump in Q4, you said that you're going to restock, reload. So what did you do with the inventory? What happened? How did you restock or and then he said put in fresh new listings and or new items or something, right? But what happened to the back inventory that didn't sell over Christmas because people don't want to buy vintage goods as gifts? it's completely skipped over. This is my one of my biggest gripes with this particular video is that you just he gave a solution that wasn't a solution, and then we just moved on to the next thing.
Again, so downturns are natural, but turn those into an advantage.
How?
And number 10, constant learning is a requirement. I talked about a little bit when you're sourcing, but it really truly applies to every aspect of this job. You need to be learning all the time. Stay curious. Stay up to date on what's working for your business and what isn't working. Because when that curiosity dies and you stop learning and you stop growing, it's probably time to quit.
Couldn't that be said about everything? You know, I mean, everything in life. I mean, I like to cook every now and then. I learn new recipes all the time. It's sure, you know, you're gonna hang up the gloves because you don't want to learn anymore. But and that only happens when you feel old and lazy and out of energy. If you're gonna do something, you're clearly gonna learn all the time. I don't know.
So keep that alive in your business, and you're gonna find much more success. And number 11, I want to talk a little bit about trends. I call this the shiny object syndrome.
Ooh.
What you're going to find if you watch a lot of YouTube or Instagram or any one of the social media platforms, there's going to be trends that everybody follows, that all of the resellers are all moving in the same direction. And I'm going to tell you, be very cautious of that. Think about it. If you were at a water park and everybody goes to the pool, if you go with them, you're just going to wind up in a very crowded pool that somebody's probably already peed in. So don't be afraid to go your own way and forge your own path. I think you'll enjoy it much more. Number 12.
Okay. It's very nice to say go your own way and go your own path. Sure, right? On paper, but the thing is that, you know, you can't just encourage this without a little bit of context of having a sense of direction, right? You don't want to send somebody off and say, go your own way, go your own path, and they have no map whatsoever, right? They have to have, you know, some clue of what they're doing to go off in their own way. And as far as that water park thing, people are still in line in the water park because each water park ride or whatever is still a self-experience gain for yourself, right? It's not about, okay, we're all jumping in the same pool. When you jump in the same pool and you're all doing reselling and you're all doing the same categories, mostly clothing and then physical media of books, DVDs, CDs, board games, stuff like that. Yeah, you're all selling from the same pool. That's bad. That's heavy competition. That's no good. But if you're just going to, you know, getting in line at the water park to do the exact same slide, even if somebody has peed, we're trying not to think about that, but it's still, you know, the ride of the experience. And then you acquired that, right? You got it and you had fun and then you move on. That's the analogy is like, I get where he's going with that, but it's a little hard to work with.
Well, man, have I experienced this one a lot. So think about it. I started on eBay in 99. And in 99, we ran auctions. Everything was an auction. And people wrote you checks. And It was the Wild West. And auctions went for a lot. And you just never knew how much money you were going to make. And sometimes it was insane. And the people would actually send you a check. And then you would mail it off. The transactions took weeks. And between 99 and 2024... there have been a ton of changes. And
I used to have like these folders called Not Yet Paid, and we had to go back and forth all the time. It created so much more customer service of, you know, some customers writing into us like, you know, have you shipped my item out yet? And then we find them later in the unpaid section because their check hasn't come in. And then finally, you know, it wasn't until I think 2004 or 2005 did they finally come out with the box to require immediate payment. And even then we were very apprehensive about using it because it would limit the way that customers paid, right? So then it's like, okay, if I check this box, then I'm omitting everybody who pays with checks. And there was still quite a few people who paid with check, you know.
And every single time they happened, they sucked. I hated all of them. Your beloved platform is going to change, and it's going to suck. But here's the reality of it is, if you compare 1999 eBay to 2024 eBay, 2024 wins hands down every single time. Even though I hated change, they've created a much better platform. And I feel the same way on, we use a lot more of Facebook Marketplace and Poshmark and Etsy. The changes have all improved over time, even if individual ones didn't stick. So your beloved platform is going to change, and it's going to end up being okay. Number 13, pricing is...
I felt as if that's kind of just unnecessary to say. I don't know. That was just kind of obvious.
Tricky. One of the things about pricing is that you're never sure what to list your item at. But if you're willing to learn, the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to price something too low and it's going to sell too quick. And in that is a terrific lesson. Even though pricing is tricky, it is also a tremendous tool for you to control.
You can control your sell-through rate by raising and lowering your prices, okay?
The sell-through rate in your own store. So think about that as a learning opportunity when you're trying to come to the right price, especially if it's something a little bit more rare. Don't be...
This thing is very hard to talk about, because he's saying that, don't sell it too low because you're leaving money on the table, because you could hold it for, okay, that depends on your operation and how valuable your space is to you. If you're sharing a lot of your inventory space by sacrificing your home space, then you don't really feel it, because you've developed, you've already dedicated your garage or your basement or a bedroom or something to inventory space, right? And your whole business is based on the waiting game. I bought something, I don't care. It's going to move in 2 months, 3 months, 8 months. I don't care, right? If you have a professional warehouse type of business, then the problem is that goods that sit in your warehouse that didn't move based on your projected time, then it's increasing in cost because somebody's got to keep paying for that inventory space, right? So that storage space. So the cost of the goods is technically rising while the value of the goods is not rising. So you got to be really careful about what you're talking about here.
Be afraid to make a mistake, because we're not in this for a single sale. We're in this for the long haul. And while pricing is tricky, it's also a tremendous tool.
Yeah. So the thing about the price is tricky is about getting your money back, because if your item isn't sold, then you can't use it to do something else. So think about this, right? Sure. An item is $25 and then I sold it for $20 instead, right? And I could have gotten $25 for it. So I lost $5 left on the table. True. But I got my $20 back and I've already moved on to another sale. And that sale has flipped. And I moved on to another sale and that sale has flipped, right? So in essence, it's about getting your money back so that you have the opportunity to do more. So getting your money back quickly is not necessarily a bad thing if you have to leave some money on the table just in order to cash out quickly. You see what I'm saying? So, yeah, what he's talking about applies a lot more to traditional business. If I have a line of goods, right, what I need to do is start adjusting my price to the best volume to profit ratio. Okay. So, if I adjust it higher to $25, but it moves slowly, but if I leave a couple of bucks on the table, I move more volume than I would have made setting it at a higher profit. You see what I'm saying? Those are the times where pricing gets tricky and you need time to adjust and constantly refine your listing. But you don't do that in reselling, because if you just sold it one and done, again, you've already moved on.
All right, number 14, you do not need another project. And I say that as somebody who has bought too many projects. Look, when you're outsourcing for this job, some of what we need to be able to do is to do this efficiently so it doesn't take up all day, every day. And while no one loves to save an item more than I do, I can't save every item. And sometimes when I'm out, I don't need another sweater, no matter how cool it is, that desperately needs repair. I don't have to clean a $20 hat when I can find $20 hats that don't need cleaning. So I'm telling you right here, right now, brutal truth number 14, you do not need another project.
100% agree with what he said. That is very good advice, considering that reselling is already extremely inefficient. So then to take on, even more fixed projects and whatever, that's a big problem. But generally, a lot of people take on like fixer uppers or whatever is because, a fixer upper is something that you could buy very, very low. And then, once you fix it up, you could get a decent profit on it, right? The question is like, how many can you do? It takes up your personal time. Would it not have been better to spend all of your time to develop automation in a business, and that would contribute to evergreen growth?
Number 15, we have been guilty of this, and that is the perfect listing does not exist. We get so caught up in analyzing our listings and looking at them and trying to have everything perfect, and it won't ever be perfect because I can't know how a customer is going to go through that listing. Some of them aren't going to look at the pictures. Some of them aren't going to read the description. What I need to do and what you need to do is to get as close to accurate as we can and get it listed and then move on to the next one. The listings don't have to be perfect. They just have to be good. And in releasing that perfection gives you the freedom to get more done in a more efficient manner so that people can find the stuff that you're trying to sell.
I agree with 99% of what he said and how he said it. The only issue is what constitutes good, right? When you're first starting off, you're still trying to define that. And what constitutes this is the best that you can do type of listing. If you're talking about a title, then I would recommend, the help of ChatGPT, and you just put in as much as you know about the item, who's it for, or even ask ChatGPT for a checklist of information that it needs to help you come up with a good title. Then the only trick to it is do your best to front load some keywords in your title, meaning that the heaviest keyword that you believe it is, try your best to word it so that it's in the front of the listing. When it comes to item specifics, answer it the best as you can. When it comes to photos, take clean photos of decent resolutions, right? You don't want to go too high in the resolution because then it takes longer to load. You don't want to go lower than what eBay is asking for because then the algorithm doesn't like you. As far as description goes, you just have to be reasonable with the description, that it answers reasonable amounts of questions so that you're not bombarded by a whole bunch of questions because it's mostly answered in your description. That's pretty much the best that you could do to define what makes a good listing to just go ahead and put up. The question is, when you're running our eBay reseller model and you're just trying to, make as much sales as you can, and you need to put up listings every single day because you're going through the burnout of all this work, right? So the issue is, do you have the time to spend on ChatGPT for every single title? Do you have the time to carefully take photos, or are you taking photos very quickly? When you put up like descriptions and stuff, are you doing, in-depth item specifics on your descriptions, or are you just doing generic descriptions? That's the issue. That's what's hard to balance about reselling, because you want to go through the work efficiently and quickly, right? But there's no way you're not going to sacrifice some precision in order to do it.
Number 16, profits are so easy to overestimate, especially if you're just getting started. If I sell a $100 band tee, I did not make $100. If I bought that shirt for $35 and sold it for $100, I didn't make $65. And if I take the cost of the shirt minus the eBay fees and minus the shipping,
wait, what?
$35 and sold it for $100, I didn't make $65. And if I take the cost of the shirt minus the eBay fees and minus the shipping, I still have to account for my time. Did I have to drive a long way to pick this up? Was it part of a lot? Was it 15 garage sales and it's the only thing I found? It's so easy to overestimate how much you made. Be very aware as you're going into this to not overestimate. Try to keep track of how you're doing so that you don't end up with any surprises.
I 100% agree with what he just said here, but I also feel as if this kind of advice just kind of applies to everything. You should be a little more conscientious about costs when talking about money and numbers in general.
Because being surprised financially is typically a bad deal for a small business owner. All right, number 17, difficult buyers exist. Anybody who's telling you that aren't any, they're not selling anything. Occasionally, you're going to come across somebody who's really, really difficult to make happy, really difficult to deal with, and maybe they're not even trying to do things right, that they're trying to do things wrong. And my advice to you on those people is to don't make them business partners with you. It's okay for you to do what you need to do to get them out of your lives, out of your business, and out of your mind so that you can move on to the vast majority of customers who are terrific. Number 8.
Okay, he views customers as a business partner because, A to B transaction. Okay, I see what he means. Or otherwise, I'm like, why are you calling this guy a business partner? We're not on the same side of the fence here. Okay, so here's the thing, right? I see resellers talk about this or make videos about this, and I'm not too sure what to feel about it because sometimes maybe, it's just for the sake of making a video. But the thing about bad customers and all that stuff is that I would say nearly 100% of the time almost, right? It's just it's small cases that gets really, really out of hand. But most of the time, you're making more of a big deal about it than they are. Sure, there's going to be nagging customers or whatever, but that's not the way you're supposed to look at business. All business is going to have some kind of loss. It could have been lost through transit. It could have been lost for whatever reason, okay? Or it could have been a bad ruling by eBay, or somebody scammed something, or somebody said something, or anything could happen, right? So the issue is, what is the margin of loss in your business that should be pre-calculated? Whatever happened in the long run, okay? So at the end of your quarter, and it was no more than a 3% loss or whatever percentage loss that you deem acceptable to yourself, just take it. Even if scammers scam you, I've been wanting to say this for a while. Even if the scammers scam you, it's not everybody. As long as it's so tiny, right? You can't let that hold you back. Your focus still needs to be to push ahead. Most people are not doing that. Most people are still helping you to be profitable. Most people who buy stuff really want to keep what they spent the time and energy to shop for. So again, for the most part, when it comes to like these scammers or these difficult customers, the only person who can make this a bigger deal than it actually is yourself. It's better to just, figure out exactly what is it that they want so that we can, move on from the situation. If sometimes you just have to give the refund so that you could avoid getting a negative or something, you should just pay the ransom for this and then move on, because I guarantee you a week or two from now, you're not even going to remember it anymore. So the way to look at business is to look at it, zoomed out a little bit on that, and then just see, okay, he was a jerk, but it's still within my margin of loss, so it's whatever.
18, your social life is going to suffer, especially your work social life.
What is a work social life? It's either I have my work life or my social life, right?
Because for most of us, we are either working by ourselves or in a team of two. Most of us who are reselling online do not have large teams of people. So let me tell you what I do. The first thing I do as a reseller is I'm looking at who has a business that's where I want to go, because I want to talk to them. I want to move in the direction that they've already been. And I also want people that are wanting to be where I'm at behind me, coming with me. With that, I can build camaraderie with other people that are doing the same thing, because it's going to be really important to have that kind of support when you are working by yourself all day, every day.
That's a very nice way of looking at it. Okay, I totally understand to find somebody who's, you know, bigger than you for mentorship reasons, right? And this is why, you know, people usually pay for the mentorship, because what does the mentor get in return? But generally, you know, this is like a strange way of saying keeping your, because I see it, if somebody else is doing the exact same thing as I am, then that's probably my competitor. And this is just an odd way of saying, you know, keep your enemies close, right?
Number 19, consistency is key. In my previous life, I was a school superintendent and I worked 70 hours a week for the last 12 years of my career. And it's a lot. It's a lot. It's probably not as much as what I do reselling, because I wake up and I do reselling. But here's the great part, and also the warning. The great part about reselling online for yourself and your...
It sounds like he didn't want to continue that sentence, and then he pivoted away from it because he wanted to say that at the end of the day, reselling is even more work than when he was a superintendent. And he's probably making better pay just as a superintendent.
Your own business, you can take off whenever you want. You want to take a break and go somewhere, you can do that. Here's the downside. You cannot take off every time you want. You can't put the business aside, because guess what? When you leave and don't do this job doesn't get done.
Yeah, obviously, if you're self-employed, this is how it works. You don't get paid leave when you're self-employed because there's nobody paying you.
Nobody's doing it. If you work alone or in a pair like Melody and I, there isn't anybody running the store when we're not here. So consistency is key. Even though you can take off whenever you want, you're going to have to go to work.
I totally agree with this message that consistency is key, but I don't know the way that he's framing it, because obviously you don't get paid leave if you're self-employed. Yeah.
And you're going to have to be there on a regular basis, getting the job done. Number 20.
Right, because earlier he said it's either you or, you know, a team of two, like you and your spouse does this. So if you're not there, not only is there nobody to pay you, there's no employees either. So it's just so kind of obvious, isn't it?
20, impulse buying is a problem. One of the keys to being successful as an online reseller is to make sure that when you buy something, you have a pretty good idea of what it's going to sell for, how long it's going to take to sell, what it's going to cost you in time and effort to get it.
This piece of advice or hard truth is weird. It's just super weird. Okay, what is an impulse buy? What do people usually mean when they say they impulse buy? You're buying for yourself, right? So when you are outsourcing, that's not buying. Sourcing is buying with the intention of reselling the item. So if you suddenly switch to an impulse buy while you're sourcing, you're not sourcing anymore. So it's kind of like saying, you know, when you go to the gym, you know, just make sure you're not horsing around, right? Because the moment you're horsing around, you're probably not working anymore, right? So I don't really understand this piece of advice.
Listed as well as dollars that it costs. Impulse buying are those times when you're out, you see something and you're like, wow, super cool. I don't know how it's going to do, but I'm going to buy that. Sure, sometimes those gambles are going to pay off. But a lot of times you're going to end up with stuff at the house and it's going to start accumulating. And then you're going to end up getting it to somebody else or donating it. So be very careful with impulse buys to make sure that you...
Okay, I wouldn't have said be very careful with impulse buys, okay? I would have said when you're sourcing, don't just go by a gut feeling, okay? Try to be a little bit more data-driven in your business decisions. I think that would have been a lot more solid, you know, a little more rock solid than than just switching to impulse buys, because sourcing and impulse buying is, you know, two different faces.
You know what that item is going to sell for and how long it's going to take to sell. Right. And number 21, and this is genuinely a brutal truth, reselling is tough. Like, there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to do. There's a lot of competition. But I
let that really sink in. Those three things that he said: lot to do, lot to learn, lot of competition. The reason why you should pivot to a traditional model is because you want to just put a lot of emphasis on learning, okay? Because what you're learning is, you know, measuring 10 times and just cutting once. You don't want to have to do that much work, okay? Every single business is going to require work, and it's a matter of perspective, right? Once you're comparing the amount of work that you have to put in long-term versus reselling, oh, the reselling work, it's just nonstop, okay? While eventually a traditional selling model is just like building a house. You're not building a house every single day, right? You're not rebuilding your shelter every single day. The whole point is to build a shelter and then be able to use that shelter for many, many years, right? That is what building a business is. In reselling, there's no actual building here. That's the issue.
I'm talking to you directly. I want you to stop and think about everything in your life that has happened before you're sitting here watching this video. You have probably overcome a lot of stuff. You have probably walked through a lot of minefields to get here. You have probably overcome more than most people would ever dream that you've had to do. So yes, reselling is tough. You are tougher.
So basically, you know, reselling is tough, but do it anyways. All right, guys, that's the video. Take care.